There are times when very young children suffer terribly because of choices their parents make. This account tells the story of a baby named Mary Welch, who was born on October 23, 2017, and died on August 2, 2018. Mary was only 10 months old when she passed away in Solon Township, Kent County, Michigan. Her parents, Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari, were found responsible for her death. They did not give her enough food or water, and the result was malnutrition and dehydration. Both parents ended up being convicted of first-degree murder. This tragic event is important because it shows how certain fears, beliefs, and decisions can have dreadful consequences for a child who depends on grown-ups for everything. Mary's story also reveals something about Child Protective Services, CPS, the legal system, and how the public responded when they learned the details. Parents normally have rights to choose what is best for their children, such as the kind of meals they eat or which doctor they see. But every parent must still provide safe conditions and meet basic needs. In Mary's situation, it appears that these most basic responsibilities were not fulfilled for much of her life. CPS records say that the agency had been aware of the family situation since 2014. Back then, THC, a substance found in marijuana, had shown up in the couple's oldest newborn child. It is not entirely clear if this caused repeated visits from CPS or if they just had occasional check-ins. But we know CPS suspected something was off in the household well before Mary was born. That meant there were early warning signs that the parents might not follow standard care practices. Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari had at least 3 children, Mary included. Later information showed that 2 of those children never visited a licensed doctor. They were not taken for well baby appointments or any routine checkups. Some parents avoid modern healthcare because they do not trust it, or they have religious reasons for turning to prayer alone. Others become convinced by conspiracy theories or think that vaccines are harmful. In Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari's case, they seem to harbor deep fears of doctors and believe that medical professionals could not help them. They likely started out feeling that they were making better decisions for their children. Sadly, those decisions led to Mary's death. When Mary was born, she weighed a fairly typical amount for a newborn, probably around 6 to 7 pounds. Yet by the time she died 10 months later, her weight had risen to only about 8 pounds total. Typically, a 10-month-old baby might weigh 16 to 20 pounds. So Mary weighed barely half the average for her age. This was not just a minor delay. It was a serious case of malnutrition. One of the most important roles of a parent is to supply food and water for their child. Infants cannot feed themselves or communicate their needs beyond crying. If parents do not respond, the situation will quickly grow worse. Mary's low weight suggests that her parents either did not notice or chose to ignore the clear signs of trouble. A baby losing energy and showing thin arms or legs is an obvious indicator that something is very wrong. As more details about Mary's home were shared, it became clear the environment was in terrible shape. The county sheriff later testified in court that the living conditions were filthy. There was mold, vermin, insects, and many other problems that could hurt a child's health. Naturally, people asked why CPS had not removed Mary and her siblings sooner. In theory, Child Protective Services tries to keep families together if at all possible. They might give parents resources, suggestions, and repeat visits rather than take kids away immediately. Sometimes the parents make the home look better just before a visit, and any dangerous issues remain hidden. Officials typically need strong proof of severe risk to remove children. By the time that level of proof appeared in Mary's case, it was too late. Mary's parents believed they were doing what was right, or at least they claimed they did. Yet the outcome was catastrophic. Child neglect, failing to provide a child with food, water, shelter, clothing, or medical care, is one of the biggest forms of child abuse around the globe. In the United States alone, child abuse and neglect cause over 1,000 deaths each year. Many people cannot imagine how parents could let their child starve, but it happens more often than we might realize. Sometimes, extreme beliefs about healthcare or deep fears of doctors lead parents to ignore the fact that their child desperately needs help. After Mary's death, the official autopsy report gave chilling facts about what happened to her body. The medical examiner found damage to her lungs, heart, and abdominal organs. Mary's thymus gland, which aids the immune system, was shrunken. Her bone marrow could not produce enough white or red blood cells. Starvation had affected her from head to toe. White blood cells are vital for fighting infections, and red blood cells carry oxygen. If her body lacked the nutrients to produce these cells, every organ would struggle. Such damage does not occur overnight. It takes weeks or months of malnourishment. An expert witness at trial stated that Mary died from malnourishment and dehydration. Severe dehydration can kill within days, meaning Mary lacked clean water or fluids for a significant period. It is reasonable to assume the parents noticed something was seriously wrong. A child that underweight, who should be crawling or sitting up, would look frail and sickly. The parents later admitted they could see Mary was thin, yet they chose not to visit a doctor. They said religious reasons prevented them from trusting any medical professional. Some news reports suggested that the family's beliefs were tied to mistrust of healthcare, perhaps including vaccines. While many people have questions about medical procedures, it is extremely rare for them to starve their children because of these beliefs. Mary's case involved not just refusal of modern healthcare, but refusal of basic nourishment. So it went far beyond concerns about doctor visits or shots. Mary also lived in a dirty environment. This mattered a great deal because a malnourished baby has almost no immune defense. Conditions like mold, insects, and vermin increase the chance of diseases, making the situation much worse. Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari said they believed their faith would protect their kids. But Mary received no miracle. She needed regular feedings, medical attention, and a clean place to live. She did not get any of those. Both parents acknowledged that Mary was not gaining weight. Yet they stood by, telling themselves she would be fine. Babies have certain growth markers. At a few months, they should be stronger. By 10 months, they might be able to crawl or pull themselves up. Mary's lack of development should have raised enormous red flags. The autopsy photographs and data demonstrated that she was in a state similar to children in famine-stricken areas. That level of starvation does not occur just because parents miss a feeding here and there. It reflects a long period with too little food and water. It is important to understand that religion in itself is not the villain. Many devoutly religious families still use doctors and keep their children well fed. However, religion mixed with strong distrust of modern systems can turn into a toxic combination if parents refuse vital care. In Mary's case, the parents' fear seems to have outweighed their sense of basic responsibility. They may have truly believed doctors would harm Mary, or perhaps they convinced themselves that she was not actually sick. Either way, they let her suffer until she died. On August 2nd, 2018, Mary died when she was just 10 months old. The parents found her lifeless and finally called 911. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late to do anything. Authorities then had to determine how a baby ended up so malnourished in a place with grocery stores and hospitals nearby. Mary's extremely low weight, along with other observations, made it obvious that she had not received enough food or fluids for a long time. Investigators took photographs of the house that day, which would later be used in court. They saw the mess and the hazards that the sheriff described. They also checked on Mary's siblings, who were taken into protective custody. CPS had known about the family for years, starting with the THC incident in 2014. But the system had somehow failed to protect Mary. Some people blame CPS, but these agencies are often overloaded with cases. They also have legal limits that prevent them from removing kids unless the situation is extremely dire. If the parents manage to hide the worst problems, or if officials never see hard evidence of abuse, the children can remain at risk. Mary's parents might have told authorities that she was just a small baby, downplaying her condition. By the time her actual state was revealed, she was gone. When the police interviewed Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari, the parents explained that they did not trust doctors at all. They felt it went against their faith to rely on modern medicine or to let outsiders dictate how to raise their children. People can develop these beliefs in many ways, including reading materials that paint the medical system as harmful or corrupt. Over time, such views can grow stronger until a person rejects all health services. If a baby is never taken to a doctor, nobody on the outside can see she is failing to grow or meet milestones. A key moment occurred when the sheriff later testified in court that the parents did not seem deeply sad about Mary's death. According to him, they were more anxious about what would happen to them. Everyone reacts to tragedy differently, but law enforcement found it suspicious. Soon, the authorities realized this was not just a case of a sick infant who died despite care. It looked like homicide by neglect. In legal terms, felony murder can happen if someone dies as a result of first-degree child abuse. Refusing to give a baby the necessary nutrition and water is definitely child abuse. Because Mary died from those conditions, her parents faced murder charges. Footage of the parents learning about these charges quickly spread online. In it, Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari looked shocked and confused. Many viewers felt they did not show the kind of grief or horror one might expect when faced with a baby's death. Their reaction sparked strong emotions in the public. People took to social media, calling for a harsh punishment, saying they deserved to be locked away forever. Some commenters focused on how they seemed more bewildered than upset about losing their child. Word of Mary's death soon spread throughout the state and beyond. Many were appalled by the idea of a child dying from simple lack of food and water in modern-day America. Michigan has abundant medical facilities and food resources, so it is hard to imagine how a baby could starve unless the parents refused those resources. Some argued that if the parents truly felt they could not trust doctors, they should at least have offered their baby enough formula or basic nutrition. Others talked about whether the father controlled the mother. Yet overall, the public's reaction included anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. Friends or relatives might have noticed Mary's frailty, but we do not have clear accounts of anyone stepping in. Child neglect can remain hidden when parents isolate themselves or avoid letting people see the child. With no doctor visits, there was no record of Mary's growth, or lack of it. No one was there to track her falling weight on a medical chart. A single appointment might have raised alarm bells that saved her life. Doctors can place an infant on a special feeding plan or do tests to see why the baby is not growing. Yet these parents never gave medical staff the chance. Tatiana Fusari said she was terrified of her husband. Domestic violence can keep people in dangerous situations because they fear punishment if they speak out. Though the law can show understanding when someone is abused, it typically cannot excuse letting a baby die. Even if a person is controlled by a partner, the court wants to see if there were any opportunities to ask for help. For Mary's condition to reach such a dire point, the mother likely had multiple moments when she could see her daughter weakening. That neither parent took action was what led to the murder charges and their eventual convictions. Meanwhile, Child Protective Services takes criticism from those who believe the agency should have intervened earlier. CPS had contact with the family since 2014, but did not remove the children. Agency workers are stretched thin and must balance respecting parents' rights with ensuring child safety. Without strong evidence, it can be difficult to justify removing kids from a home. Families are often given help or repeated visits rather than losing custody. However, some cases show that this well-meaning approach can fail, especially if parents hide what they are doing. When the case went to trial, prosecutors laid out the full story. Mary had severe malnutrition and dehydration. Her organs were damaged. Her home was filthy, and her parents' statements showed they willfully avoided any medical care. Expert witnesses explained that Mary's death was preventable. Even at a late stage of malnourishment, hospitals can often save a baby's life by supplying proper nutrition, fluids, and medicine. The jury was also shown social media posts where Seth Welch talked about not trusting doctors. In the end, it was not just a question of whether they knew Mary was thin, it was whether they deliberately did nothing to change that. Images of the home revealed bug infestations, mold, and a general lack of hygiene. While a messy house alone is not necessarily criminal, the combination of filth and the parents' failure to feed Mary was damning. In child neglect cases, the environment can show how the parents think about cleanliness and safety. A cluttered or dirty home by itself does not always mean abuse is happening, but here it reinforced the idea that they were not tending to basic needs. Seth Welch received life without parole in 2020. Tatiana Fusari received the same punishment in 2021, along with extra years for child abuse. There were discussions about how the justice system should handle claims of spousal abuse. However, the court determined that even if she feared her husband, she had enough awareness to realize Mary needed help. Looking at the photographs of Mary, it was impossible to imagine how the mother could have missed how serious her baby's condition was. Mary's surviving siblings were taken away by CPS to ensure they would be safe. They are likely in foster care or living with relatives. protected from the same fate. They may grow up wondering about their parents and sister, perhaps learning the truth later. The community near Solon Township in Kent County was shaken by the story. People asked how a baby could starve in an area with plentiful food and medical services. That sparked arguments about the role of government in monitoring children's health. Some felt that more laws are needed to require babies to have regular checkups, while others worried that this would infringe on personal and religious freedoms. Many child neglect cases do not attract this level of media attention unless something very unusual or disturbing happens. As in Mary's situation, some parents are charged with manslaughter instead of murder if they are found to have been reckless but not intentional. Yet Mary's death involved so many steps of willful neglect that the parents faced one of the most severe charges possible: homicide felony murder. Under Michigan law, if a child dies as a result of first-degree child abuse, this can be prosecuted as murder. That is how the couple ended up with life sentences. Organizations focused on child welfare often say that this case reveals a larger pattern. Children can fall through the cracks when parents go to extremes in their personal beliefs or hide from authorities. These groups want more funding for CPS to conduct thorough home inspections and impose checkups on at-risk families. They also work on educating parents about the importance of medical care. Religious freedom is important, but it does not mean parents can deny life-saving interventions for their kids. Mary's story highlights a few powerful lessons. First, neglect can be just as lethal as direct violence. We often assume abuse means hitting a child, but ignoring their basic needs can cause just as much harm, if not more. Second, medical checkups are crucial. Babies grow fast in the first year, and doctors track that growth at scheduled visits. Had Mary been seen by a pediatrician, that doctor would have noticed her low weight, run tests, and try to fix the problem. A third lesson is that beliefs can become dangerous when they prevent people from seeing reality. Parents can hold spiritual or personal convictions, but if those lead them to refuse essential care, a child's life is in jeopardy. A fourth lesson involves community responsibility. Neighbors, friends, or relatives who see a child losing weight or living in unclean conditions should reach out to CPS or other authorities. While people often worry about prying, a single phone call can save a life. The fifth lesson is about child protection laws. Some question whether the government should have the power to make doctor visits mandatory for infants. Others argue that would be too controlling. The death of Mary Welch pushes us to think hard about these issues. Maybe if mandatory checkups had existed, her condition would have been noticed and addressed. Mary Welch's entire existence lasted a mere 10 months, a time frame when most babies are growing, learning to crawl, and discovering the world. Her parents had the job of feeding and nurturing her, but they did not do it. They blamed religious or personal reasons for avoiding doctors, yet they never had to starve her to maintain those beliefs. Even if they did not trust hospitals, they could have given her enough formula or breast milk at home. The fact that she gained only about 1.25 pounds since birth shows a level of neglect that is difficult to understand or forgive. Under the law, Mary's death was first-degree murder through child abuse. Seth Welch got life without parole, and Tatiana Fusari received the same. She argued that her husband was abusive, but the court still held her responsible. A baby can neither call the police nor prepare her own meals. This helplessness is why the justice system responds so strongly when parents fail in such a tragic way. Many people who heard about Mary's case felt anger toward both parents, calling them monsters for letting an innocent child suffer so long. Child Protective Services could not step in soon enough, even though they had a record of issues with the family. This failure leads to larger discussions on whether CPS should have more power or resources to stop such disasters. But the direct blame still lands on the parents who chose to ignore the most basic signs that their child was in danger. They might not have trusted doctors, but any adult knows a baby cannot survive without frequent feeding. The presence of vermin and mold also shows the lack of attention to the children's general well-being. In some parts of the world, children go hungry because their families live in poverty or war zones. That was not Mary's situation. She lived in a place with decent infrastructure, stores, and possible assistance. But her parents cut themselves off from these aids. Fear and misinformation led them to avoid the very help that might have saved her. This shows how dangerous certain beliefs can be when they overshadow simple reality. A child's fundamental right to live outweighs any parental fears about conspiracies or distrust. Mary's death touched many lives, from the social workers who had once visited the family, to the detectives who pieced together the evidence, to the people who saw the parents' viral court appearance. In that footage, observers noticed they seemed more baffled than sad or shocked at the idea of losing Mary. Some found that reaction callous, while others thought it showed denial or confusion. Regardless, Mary was gone, and the parents were facing a lifetime in prison. The siblings who survived this ordeal were placed far from their parents. As they grow older, they may ask questions about what happened to Mary. While it's painful, at least they have a chance to live in an environment where they can receive food, healthcare, and normal development. For the community, Mary's death sparked discussions about the balance between parental rights and child welfare. It is never easy to decide when the government should step in, but letting a child die from malnutrition is undeniably a situation where intervention was needed. If we look at other cases of child neglect, we see that parents often have mental health struggles, addictions, or misguided beliefs. It can be a challenge for outsiders to detect these problems before tragedy strikes. However, people are encouraged to pay attention to warning signs: a baby who looks thin, parents who refuse to let anyone see the child, or a household that has serious hygiene issues. Even a small suspicion might be worth reporting, because time is crucial when an infant is involved. At trial, the parents' defense tried to show they had not meant to kill Mary and did not realize her condition was that extreme. But the evidence revealed that they knew she was underweight and still refused all standard medical care. Mary's body showed signs of long-term starvation, not a sudden decline. That was enough for the jury to convict them of murder. Tatiana Fusari's claim of spousal abuse did not overturn the fact that she could have done something, anything, to get Mary the help she needed. In the end, the court's perspective was that both parents bore the responsibility. When the sentencing was announced, life without parole, many people supported it. They believed that letting a defenseless infant die in such a manner was among the worst crimes imaginable. A minority of observers questioned if the punishment for Tatiana Fusari should be somewhat less, given her accusations about abuse. However, the final legal decision stood. She would also spend her life in prison. The message was clear that the law does not tolerate child neglect leading to death, no matter the parent's personal or religious reasons. To rescue a baby like Mary, even if it feels invasive, it could be the difference between life and death. After the trial, child welfare advocates emphasized how easy it is for extreme beliefs to become harmful, especially when children cannot speak up for themselves. They pointed out that not all parents who distrust the medical system endanger their children to this degree. But Mary's case illustrates the worst possible outcome. If people learned anything from this tragedy, it might be that ignoring a baby's physical needs because of fear or conspiracy theories is never acceptable. Every baby deserves a safe and healthy life, and neighbors or relatives who sense trouble should never hesitate to call authorities. Mary Welch did not reach her first birthday. She never had the chance to learn to walk or talk. She never got to explore her surroundings or develop friendships. Her life was cut short in a slow and painful way as she became weaker with each passing day. The medical examiner's findings about her organs show that her body tried to adapt to the lack of nutrients, but could not survive on prayer alone. Food and water are essential to keep an infant alive and thriving. At the broader level, people reflected on whether more government policies could stop such situations. Some suggested requiring every infant to have regular doctor checkups, while others felt that would be an overreach of state power. The debate remains delicate because child welfare collides with parental rights, and not every family that avoids doctors is guilty of abuse. But Mary's death stands out as a disturbing reminder that a line must be drawn when a baby's life is at risk. Reflecting on Mary's short life sparks powerful emotions. The idea that her parents allowed her to waste away while continuing day-to-day life horrifies many. Some try to imagine what Mary felt: hunger, weakness, confusion, and no relief. She likely had no idea that there was a whole world beyond the walls of her home where children receive enough food, love, and medical attention. All she knew was a day-to-day struggle until her body gave out. The greatest lesson is that a parent's personal beliefs do not excuse starting a child. No matter how much someone distrusts the healthcare system, Refusing to feed a baby and ignoring blatant signs of malnutrition crosses a moral and legal line. Mary's autopsy indicated that her organs reflected advanced starvation. If a doctor had seen her, even in the final stage, there might have been a chance to save her. She did not get that chance. In the end, both Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari will remain in prison without parole. Their other children will grow up elsewhere. Over time, people might forget the names and details of this case, but it continues to serve as a warning. If we suspect a child is neglected or abused, we have to speak up. If parents are letting their child waste away due to misguided beliefs, it is crucial for someone to step in. A simple phone call can begin an investigation that might as we try to make sense of Mary's story. We see how a mixture of fear, distrust, and extreme thinking can become lethal when combined with the normal demands of caring for a baby. Children rely on grown-ups for every bite they eat, every sip they drink, and every doctor visit that might detect problems. If parents deny all that, the result can be the slow, cruel death of a child who should have been protected above all else. We can hope that Mary's memory prompts communities to check in on vulnerable children and helps organizations like CPS gain the resources and laws they need to intervene more effectively. We can also hope it reminds parents that beliefs must never overshadow a child's basic needs. Mary did not have a choice. She had no voice in what happened to her. She depended on her parents, who sadly put their mistrust of doctors and their personal convictions ahead of her well-being. News articles showed how public reactions spanned from rage to sorrow to confusion. People are still asking, how could they watch their baby fade away? Perhaps we will never fully grasp their thinking. Seth Welch, in particular, posted many anti-doctor statements online, expressing his view that only God should heal. Yet, in their everyday routine, the parents either ignored or rationalized Mary's extreme weight loss. Over time, even that became normal to them. In concluding Mary's story, it is clear that although the legal outcome provided justice, it did not restore a life that was tragically cut short. The parents are behind bars, but no punishment will bring Mary back or erase her final suffering. Her name stands as a stark reminder of what can happen when child neglect goes unchecked. And it serves as a caution against believing that personal or religious viewpoints free a parent from the responsibility to safeguard a young life. If you ever find yourself in a situation where a child's basic needs are being ignored, remember Mary. It is better to raise a false alarm than to stay silent and watch a preventable disaster unfold. Even small actions, a worried phone call, a check-in with the parents, or a discreet report to CPS can alter the course of a child's life. That is part of the collective duty of any society, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. In the end, the simplest truth remains: a baby cannot survive without proper food, clean water, and care. Whether the parents distrust the medical system or hold other strong beliefs, a child's right to live overrides those beliefs. Mary's heartbreaking death should never have happened, especially not in an environment with so many resources nearby. Yet it did happen, and now her parents will spend their lives in prison for letting it occur. As difficult as this story is, it underlines the importance of awareness, compassion, and legal protections for children. Mary Welch needed the same essentials any baby needs: steady nourishment, a safe home, and help from adults who recognized her fragile state. She received none of that. May her memory spur more people to notice and respond to the hidden signs of neglect. Even if it feels uncomfortable to get involved, it might save a life like Mary's before it's too late.